Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are right now. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast from Portland, Oregon, USA. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is that has come to mind that we'll be talking about tonight. We'll be talking to Big Al Christians, who's been on before in the past, and he's always a hoot, and I expect the same thing to happen tonight. And how are you feeling this time?
Ready to rip and snort.
You were the same thing you said a year ago.
Absolutely.
Good to see you again, my friend. He is also a personal friend of mine. He's a fellow humanist, and we have other things in common, which we won't talk about because it'll be offensive to some of the viewers. No. do that for an interesting character. Okay. Yeah, you're feeling okay right now?
Wonderful.
How come you're not nervous? I'm always nervous. So as you know, the first half of the show is going to be what we call the bio segment, so that we can get an idea of where you're coming from. Even though it's been done before, we're going to do it again this time.
Okay.
And as I say, if I ask you a question that you don't want to answer, you can tell me to get lost, or I don't want to answer that, or whatever. And now and then I will say that to a guest, and then in the show I'll ask a question, and he answers, and then later on he's unhappy because he didn't like the answer he gave. So just a warning admonition, all right. So anyhow, let's see. I'm going to ask you a few questions. If I were to ask your best friend, who is Al? Who is Big Al Christians? What would he or she say? Your best friend. Be your best friend. Big Al is, or Al, or what?
I don't know.
Don't you know?
I don't know.
Don't you have any best friends?
I don't have any friends that I would put ahead of all the others. I have some who have known me longer than others, but no, I don't say that I could identify with a best friend.
Well, pick one. A friend.
Pick one. Mm-hmm. Okay.
What would he say? Who is Al?
What would they say?
Al is... I stumped you already.
You already stumped me. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. So when and where were you born?
I was born in New Jersey in 1950.
You don't say that correctly. You got to say Jersey.
Been away too long. Been away too long.
Okay, Big Al.
But it was in the orbit of New York, so I was raised within the metropolitan area of New York, and I thought that was the whole world for a while.
You did, huh?
Until I left.
And how long did you leave before you left?
I left to go to college.
Oh, yeah.
When I was 17, yep.
Your last trick question, why were you born? Remember that one?
Well,
we can't even get started, can we?
I went to the doctor last week, and they asked me, are you here because of an accident? And I answered no. So I presume that I was a wanted child.
Oh, so you were a wanted child, so that's why you were born, because you were wanted. Who wanted you?
Couple of working class people in New Jersey, yeah. A couple of hardworking folks in New Jersey.
Yeah, your attitude and your answers are suitable for a New Jersey boy.
Right, right.
Anything significant about your racial or cultural heritage, or are you just plain old American white bread?
Yeah, I lived in a suburban town, mostly single-family houses. I lived in one of the few duplexes in the town.
Oh, okay, high uppity, huh?
No, not exactly. In our town, it wasn't which side of the tracks you lived on. It was how close, and the train pretty much came through our backyard.
So that says a lot about you. Woo, woo, yeah. Here's a one for you. I know you can answer this one. Religious preference. Do you have a religious preference nowadays?
I go to the Humanists, and
Is that a religion?
yeah, that's a debatable issue, I suppose.
I know I visit the same thing from time to time.
And I guess if it were a religion, there'd be parts of it I wouldn't like. But if it's more about a social group and an educational group and a do-gooder group for me, and that works out okay.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a religion, but it's not 100%.
Did you have a religion when you were younger?
Oh, I was raised in the Methodists off and on until I left home, but not real thoroughly. But there's a lot of religious background in my family. My mother's father was he was a bootlegger during Prohibition, but he was in Jersey City and in competition with the mayor, and the police came and shut him down. And at that point, he found Jesus and became a very devout. What was he in? Jehovah's Witnesses, something like that. And he started. Previously, he had held poker games and served beer in his house, and people would leave him money. And then he started preaching in his house. And I don't know if he passed the collection plate or not, but he had a regular day job, but he was also a fundamentalist preacher, and that really soaked into my mother, both positively and negatively. She, in some ways, she thought he was just a terrible father, but on the other hand, she absorbed most of the religion from him and kept it all of her life.
How much of that characteristic in your family do you have?
Oh, probably some. Probably some.
Did you ever really embrace tightly an organized religion as we know it, that counting humanism? I was a Catholic, for example.
No, I enjoyed going to the Unitarians, but I was always.
That's not a religion. That's
I was always
pseudo-religion.
I was always having trouble with the preachers there. Because the Unitarian Church in Portland, the first Unitarian, at that time they were pretty strong believers in the supernatural, and promoted kind of a bunch of silly ideas.
Yeah, well, there's West Hills Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, which is in the Portland area, which is in Beaverton. I attended there for a while, for a number of years, and then I went to the Unitarian Church downtown first, and in Portland, and occasionally I bounced around between Wharf and the First Unitarian Church in downtown Portland, and then occasionally I come to the Humanist, not as often as I used to, and I still think that I'm a humanist or something more Buddhist or something like that, but that's where I am right now. And I'm not going to change anymore.
Yeah, I kind of like, I think Thomas Paine explained this in his book on religion, where he said he believed in the religion of Jesus, not the religion about Jesus. But then, when he talked about the religion of Jesus, he kind of picked and chose which parts of the Bible he wanted to keep to make that something that he was happy with. But that's the basic thing of all these of modern life today is you get to choose your own values and choose wisely.
So Thomas Paine has had some influence on you and your
Yes,
thinking,
sure.
as a flavor.
As a fellow who, he didn't stay away from trouble. He proposed women's rights and humane treatment of animals in the United States even before the Revolutionary War. Then he wrote in favor of the American Revolution, things that Washington read to the troops before he crossed the Delaware. And then he went to England and wrote the Rights of Man, which got the king so upset that the guy who printed the book, published the book for Paine, was thrown in jail. Paine narrowly escaped and went to France and participated in the revolution there. But when that went a little too far, he was opposed to executing the king, and he got thrown in jail and almost got executed himself there. So he went through a lot of personal risk to express himself in three different places. And the British Revolution of 1840 was pretty much inspired by his writings about 35 years or 40 years after he wrote them, long after he was dead.
Are you following in his footsteps?
No, not at all. Not at all. I have much more.
Isn't Iceland maybe coming for you pretty soon?
I don't know who's going to come for me. I was outside the ice building of when was that? Last Friday night, I think it was.
In Portland?
Yeah, right. And there were two demonstrations in Portland the same night, the same time. The one I read in the paper or on the internet that the one downtown drew 1,000, and I guess that the one down at the ice building drew about 500 at the same time. So that's a pretty good turnout for a Friday night.
And for a relatively new organization, there's an amalgamation of certain leftist organizations that are coming together under one banner, but I'm afraid if it gets too important or possible, then we'll call the authorities out to take them down.
Yeah, don't call me a leftist. I don't think I've changed my mind about anything since I was trying really hard to be a total middle-of-the-road moderate.
That would be the day Big Al.
That was 40 years ago, but yes. No, maybe 50. I don't know. A long time ago.
That's good enough.
I haven't changed. I think lots of other people have.
Yeah.
Lots of trends have changed in those times.
And you haven't changed in all these years?
I don't know. I don't know.
How about your formal education? You mentioned earlier that you had a bachelor's, and then what?
Oh, then I went to work in the insurance business and became an actuary, which is all on-the-job training and self-study for exams and all of that kind of thing. So I didn't have any graduate training or anything specifically. Formal education after college, I didn't take any.
Yeah.
I wish I had, kind of. I think maybe I got on the wrong foot there being in business, but I don't know.
What's the difference between an actuary and an accountant?
The accountant keeps the books, and the actuary figures out what are the real big numbers that go into the books.
That's close enough.
Yeah.
And you've been retired for a while.
Almost 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
What have you been doing since your retirement?
Well, I retired I had 3 reasons. One was to take better care of my health. I made the mistake of asking my doctor if people do better health-wise before or after they retire, and she answered, retire. So at that point, I had no choice. Like, I only managed to stall her about 4 months before I had to retire. The second thing was to be a full-time citizen, and try to be a good influence on the world, and the third was to spend more time with my wife and family, be a better family guy. So those are the three things I've been going after.
Have you been successful in going after those three things?
The exercises and health thing seems to be going very well. The family thing is going pretty well, except we've had a remodel, and that's always a big jump, a big bump to your personal life and the family life when you have a remodel going on. And the being a better citizen, I'm trying. I'm trying, but always looking for new things to try to get involved in.
Yeah. What would be like a better citizen than you are now? My impression is that you're a pretty decent, a pretty good citizen.
No. I haven't been able to convince myself to stop driving an automobile and, polluting the atmosphere with all the CO2.
Well, what are you going to do if you don't drive? My gosh, you got so much things going on.
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. But how in the world can you justify it?
Some things you can't justify. Are you into the 21st century right now, or are you still back in the last century? I find myself at my age, I stopped some time ago, and all these new devices and internet and all that stuff, it just drives me nuts. Are you in the 21st century?
I try to be very selective about what kind of devices and such I let into my house. I look at the internet for news because I don't have a TV, because TV I consider even worse than the internet. So I don't have TV, so I'm tied to the internet for news and such. And I don't carry a phone because there just seem to be too many adverse effects of having a phone all the time.
Like walking into a manhole as you.
They say that that having your cell phone within reach, even if it's not doing anything, is a distraction that it lowers your ability to do any kind of intellectual task or anything like that. If you have a cell phone, you're a regular cell phone user, just even turning it off and putting it on the table while you do something else, it's still enough of a distraction that your mental agility kind of declines in its presence.
Are you a closet Buddhist or something?
No. No, I just know that I do too many things to excess, and I try not to start anything new that I'm going to do to excess.
Okay.
That I've, like 2003, I took a job where they had free coffee and very good coffee. And within 3 months, I realized I'm doing way too much of this, and I had to stop it. And I started doing tea. And by this past spring, I realized, no, I'm doing way too much tea. I had to stop that, too. I had to just kind of go cold turkey off of that stuff.
You're just a man of excesses, aren't you?
I'm excessive. I got to get rid of my excesses.
Yeah.
So, but I guess the trick is to align your values with your emotions, and then you can, and then maybe things will work a little better. So, you have to work on both sides of the equation, the values and the emotions. That your values and emotions can't conflict, or you're not going to go anywhere.
What gives you pleasure most of the time in your life nowadays, or joy? How often does that happen for you?
Joy, for me, is seeing people trying to take control of the world and make a better place. People working hard to try to make things better. And do we see that 3 or 4 or 5 times a month, maybe something like that?
Yeah, it's fortunate. Yeah. Can you think of any examples that come to mind now about people who are doing something in the world to make the world a better place? And no mention Trump.
Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. Let me think.
Or from the past, or alive today, either one.
I would say for example, I was, down outside ICE headquarters on Friday night.
You see what that means?
Immigrations and Customs Enforcement.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people down there and a lot of families. And when I see families and kids down there, I always tell them, good job, thanks for coming. It's great to see at least some people turning out. I've been disappointed by the turnouts at some of these events because they're way smaller than what was happening 2 years ago. But the people who are participating, you have to encourage.
Yeah.
And I was on the corner last Wednesday on the street downtown last Wednesday with the Stand on Every Corner people holding signs recommending impeachment hearings to defend democracy in America. And we were getting more beeps and waves from people driving by than we had in previous weeks. So I think things might be turning a little bit. It's encouraging.
In spite of the cult of Trump?
In spite of the cult of Trump. Well, I think those people, they didn't holler at us, make obscene gestures or anything as much as they had in previous weeks. I think by now they've all got their eyes closed. They didn't see us at all.
So you have a partner, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a wife,
I have a wife.
A wife, okay.
I have a wife.
I know that.
You know my wife.
Yes,
She's been
I
on
know
here.
your
She was
wife.
on here the last time I was here.
She's a delight.
She is a delight.
And she's
She's
a
tough,
do-gooder. She's even a tree hugger, too, I'll bet, huh? She's a nurse.
No, she's an occupational therapist.
Of
But
course.
she's about 99% retired.
99%.
She still works. I think this year she was an adjunct faculty at Pacific University, overseeing a walk-in clinic on Saturdays about once a month for diabetes outpatient care for people who couldn't afford any other kind.
She's a do-gooder.
The occupational therapy students, physical therapy students, I guess optometrists. They had a walk-in clinic for people with diabetes out there, and they got mostly immigrant families, people who couldn't afford to pay for a session with a medical practitioner, and she was on the faculty for that, which meant she got paid a little bit, one day a month for 6 or 8 months. But she's found somebody else who wants to get paid, and she's just going to be a volunteer next year. But she's still going to be doing that. And yeah, so she's not able to get completely away from it, and she's also one of the officers of a group that puts on wounds care seminars in Portland for medical people. And she figures that once once she gets it straightened out, the doctors will want to be the officers, but she hasn't got it all straightened
What's
out.
what's the name of the organization? The Moon's Care, you said?
It's a wounds
Care.
wounds care. Yeah,
the
it's called the I don't know what it's called, Columbia Wound Care Alliance or something like that.
People who have serious wounds and
it's like Saturday seminars several times a year for people in all the professions who care for wounds. I think they do occupational therapy, physical therapy, doctors, physicians, assistants, nurses, all that kind of stuff people could be attending these seminars to learn about the consequences of wounds and how to care for them. And my wife, having worked many years in the wound center and at Emmanuel as an occupational therapist, is one of the officers of that group now.
how do you keep her straight and keep her on the straight and narrow with those kinds of depressing activities?
Well, she hasn't gone back into geriatric care. That's the depressing one, because we don't escape from that one. She gets people better and back to the activities of daily living. Yeah. And that to me is, we go see some of her Bow patients from the burn unit and stuff. People who you could hardly stand to look at if you didn't realize they were human beings, because they're so badly burned.
Oh, yeah.
But she's got them living. She's got them doing. She was part of their recovery, and a lot of them are pretty darn happy.
It's part of not just her physical care of their physical body, but her attitude and her internal workings comes out in her face and her eyes, and the fact that she cares that much.
Right. And she's really happy now, because she's retired, and she says, she's got successors who are doing it probably better than she did. And that's just so wonderful to hear that. That she used to send, I think she used to send about 10 kids a year to burn camp, but this year the group at Emmanuel has about 20 kids over in Colorado at burn camp to learn that a kid with a big burn can be a normal kid. That's really wonderful.
So you get some sort of a joy experiencing what she's doing, what she's about. Huh?
Right.
It kind of rubs off on you, and
sure.
All right. And how about children?
I've got a daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I remember. Yeah. And how is she?
She's going to be 30 in about 3 weeks. No, 31. And she's looking for work. But she's looking hard.
Yeah. And would you make a statement about your political persuasion? I know you try to come across as a centrist or a practical person. Are you a left or right or center or what overall?
I voted once for a Republican back in my mid-20s, and within a year or two he'd been indicted, and so I swore it off at that point. It was a guy I knew, actually. A band I was in played at his wedding, and he'd been a guest on my radio show on community radio down in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And I voted for him, and then he went the other way, and I said, enough of this.
Okay, anyhow, any persons from the past or alive today that you admire or look up to, any names come to mind for you?
Well, the one I used to always give was Lincoln.
Besides Thomas Paine, yeah.
Because Thomas Paine, Abe Lincoln, I thought was pretty good because of his sense of humor and his focus on saving the country. And I'm not changing my ideas about that, but lately I've been getting through a book on his approach to the issue of slavery during the Civil War, and it was so purely political that it makes it hard to admire him, even though probably politically he made good choices. That he was always, when he was allowing for the possibility of the emancipation of slaves, he would always qualify it by speaking in terms of what they used to call colonization or deportation or whatever, finding a place in South America or Africa for all the freed slaves to go.
Time goes by and things don't really change deep down, in America.
Well, yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. That, it was, that made abolition tolerable, abolition of slavery tolerable to many people in the North. It's the yes but thing.
Yeah.
That, yes, I'm in favor of abolition of slavery, but where are you going to put them? Yes, I'm in favor of being humane, being a human being to the people who are trying to enter the country, but we have to have borders.
So no change.
Seems like the story just goes on and on.
Yeah, and we got to keep working at it, working at it, working at it. People of good heart and good spirits must assert themselves. We can't sit on the sidelines. Anyway, one more question before we take a break. Any memberships in organizations that you care to mention now? You belong to the American Humanist Association.
I believe my wife keeps that up. I'm in the Humanist Greater Portland, and my wife has decided that we're going to join the AHA too. So we did that.
American Humanist Association.
Right. And I think we had a similar deal going with the NAACP, where we were in the national organization, but I'm not sure if we're in the national or the local or both.
Yeah.
That or it's separate memberships, and then we support Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yay, Morris Dees.
Yes, and American Civil Liberties Union.
Yeah, you're leftist credentials. You can't hide it anymore. You're a staunch leftist.
Being in the ACLU makes you a staunch leftist.
Oh my God, yeah. But some of their decisions in the past, I'm not sure about that. But let's take a break now, okay? And then we'll come back and talk some more about the questions you get. Okay, we're back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for your viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don, that you're watching is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. We're talking about Humanist Big Al Christians in 2019. It's been a couple of years, and we're going to get to that part now about what's been going on with you and how your thinking has changed, whether it's for the good or the bad. I'm not sure about that. But anyhow, okay. Seems like I'll pick these up. Nonviolence, overthinking and not overthinking, courage, encouraging young people toward lives of moral and ethical virtue. Let's take them one at a time. Which one you want to address first? Nonviolence. Is that it?
Nonviolence.
Okay, what are you going to say about that? Nonviolence. Ooh.
Well, I'm participating in numerous demonstrations, as we have in Portland recently, mostly demonstrations that fit in with the objective of making it impossible for the current executive branch and United States Senate and Supreme Court to govern. That I don't think they're doing any good for what America is or ought to be. And yet, of course, nonviolence is the effective way to make it impossible for them to govern, not violence. And there seems to be an increasing current of language of violence.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to precondition people to actually participating in violence, which I don't think we want it or need it right now. That you would hope that the vast majority of people in the United States, according to polls and all, pretty much agree with me. I'm not anything more than a reasonable person expecting what a reasonable person would expect. And most people in the country being reasonable, the polls say, oh yeah, everybody's on our side. But why is the government not on our side? We're not doing a good enough job of expressing our will and our sovereignty as people in a democracy. And that if instead of 500 or 1,000 people out on a Friday night, we had 50,000 and 100,000, that maybe they'd see the error of their ways.
The error of their ways in nonviolence. It seems like, from what I've read and heard about our past as a species, there's a tendency that's genetically given in human beings toward violence. So is there anything we can do about our tendency, based on historical fact, about violence? Is it something our mindset, can we overcome this genetic tendency, so that if we think about things that lead to violence, then we're going to be violent, and perhaps the system or the government or whatever goes on in Washington behave violently, then this encourages us to watch that model and behave violently. And I'm not sure where I'm going with this, and I wish I knew where I was going with, but I would like to be more nonviolent, and that's why my sign, being kind to even unkind people, maybe that will help.
Well, you could look at, for example, the collapse of the Soviet Union. There wasn't very much violence involved in that. The whole evil empire there just decided, oh, it's not worth fighting this. It's done, over, gone.
So an evil empire, the Soviet Union, America is not an evil empire.
Well, if the shoe doesn't fit, don't put it on.
I'm not going to take you there.
But that's a very good question, because when you get to the question of nonviolence, well, there's also the question of, well, what's a legitimate government? You know, how much should you try to work through the system? How much is, you know, Jefferson talked about alter or abolish. He didn't say violently alter or abolish, but he said alter or abolish.
There are successful nonviolent systems in Europe.
Right. I was reading recently about this. We had one in the United States in 1774, before the Revolutionary War started in 1775. The British sent out edicts. The British were tired of all the nonsense in America. They sent out edicts that all the judges in the colonies were going to be appointed by the king now. No more local assemblies selecting judges.
That sounds somewhat familiar nowadays, doesn't it?
Right. Oh, they're all going to be appointed by the king, et cetera, et cetera. And in the county in rural Massachusetts, didn't include Boston, but included a very large part of Massachusetts, was the first place where the courts with the king's appointed judges were supposed to convene. Can't remember what the name of the town was, but in the fall of 1774, the judges went out there to hold court, and the citizens, in the form of the militias, 5,000 militiamen, turned out to protest without their weapons. But the king's judges showed up, and they're met by 5,000 militiamen. And after confabulating, the king's appointed judges all resigned, signed an agreement that the local people had a right to appoint their own judges, and gave it up. And so the American Revolution at that point was done. It was accomplished. It was won without any violence at all.
When I come back and being reincarnated, I'm going to come back as a bonobo, you know.
Right.
Yeah. I can't deal with being a human being.
It's really hard. It's really hard. You know, we had the thing, it was last week's, somebody said that, if you want to be the head of a large country, want to be the head of state of a large government, you have to kill people. And if that's a truism, who would want to be a human being?
I don't address those kinds of truisms because that's not.
How can there not be a total outrage about that whole concept?
What you're talking about, based on our reality, since we've occupied this planet, I think we can keep going in the direction that you and I think we're heading in, and overcome that or lessen it, or having it diminish. I'm still going to come back as a bonobo or some other species, or never mind.
Yeah, was it, who was it? Somebody wanted us to modify our own genes so that we'd be more like seals, just playing in the water and being happy. That, you know, thought that the human brain was not compatible with a high degree of happiness.
See, Kyle. Okay, let's move on to overthinking and not overthinking. That's a conundrum, isn't it?
Well, that's sort of what I was talking to you about in the first half, about this kind of, yes but thing, that when you get to life is complicated. The longest answer on the multiple choice questions is usually right. Things are complicated. If you look hard enough at anything, there are no simple solutions, so you can always say yes, but we won't do anything because of this, that, or something else. Overthinking, I think, is partly just finding all those reasons to not do something, or to delay. Today we had the one about the poison in pesticide that's going to be given another 3 years of life, where even though we know it's very, very bad, particularly for children, well, it's inconvenient to change now. We're going to give it 3 more years so we can do it in an orderly fashion. 4 years ago being when Obama originally promulgated the rule that said it had to go, but it was never implemented. So the yes but thing it's just everywhere.
Are you looking forward to coming back in case there's reincarnation? Do you think it's worth?
I definitely am.
Mm-hmm. What would you come back as?
What would I come back as? I would come back. Ooh, I guess it'd be nice to be a fish for a while, 'cause
A fish?
yeah.
Oh man, there's something more to life than being a fish.
Well, that'd be just once. That would just be once.
Just you.
You know, being a person is good for me. That's my nature, right? We're all human beings. We got to live up to what we find ourselves as this time. Whatever you are, there's something to learn from it. Yeah. That I've gone through a lot of different roles, you know. So I'm happy to do something different, to learn something new.
Are you courageous?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
You know, what is courage? I think it's having the right balance between fear and action or will. That you have to have just the right amount of fear for just the right things. But you know, again, that's requires wisdom that's probably beyond many of us, right? That it's easy to you know, act impulsively when you're supposed to be brave, and maybe not do a very good job, or pick a wrong thing to make a stand over, and that happens pretty often too. But yeah, you know, a lot of courageous things, I guess, would be not necessarily very dramatic. Just, for example, trust. Trust is a big part of courage. Mm-hmm. That's probably what we're losing the most of. That's the most important thing in the present day. That you almost can't trust anybody, because everybody's out to make a buck and nothing else. That very, very hard to know whom to trust.
Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly.
But you know, that's...
Where's the rainbow?
Where is the rainbow? That's right, the world is never going to be perfect. We're going to have to work at this forever, so get used to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a sort of certain satisfaction in trying to fix those things that need fixing, and being kind, and shall we do Kumbaya now, or shall we go on?
Did you know that the man who had the original record of Kumbaya lives in Portland now?
No.
It's Joe Hickerson, and he sang Kumbaya at a celebration of the 100th anniversary of Pete Seeger's birth in, where was that, Clinton Street Theater?
In Portland, yeah.
In Portland in this spring.
How come you know those kinds of things and
I was there.
You was there. Oh,
I was there because some of my friends were playing that show, and sure enough, they said Joe Hickerson's in town, and he was, you know, he's an old folk singer from way back when, and he was on stage and sang Kumbaya, which he had the first record of.
I'll be darned. That's something I'm going to savor. I'm a little embarrassed that I don't know those kinds of things. Yeah. We can talk about what's wrong with America,
Yeah.
or what's wrong with human beings, or what's right with the world, or what's right with human beings, as a finishing sort of a question to address. What's wrong with, no, we've spent much time talking about what's wrong with America. What's right with America?
What's right with America is that, you know, I think what we all have in common is that we're all operating under the illusion that we're decent people, and that at least implies that what it probably is true is that we all can be decent people once we get this, properly awakened to the truth of the situation, right? That the more you learn, the more you can actually be a decent person, and most people hold that ideal in their mind for themselves, even though they don't really find a way, or they find a way to rationalize their own existence. We still all do that most of the time anyway. But, you just different people amongst us, find different sources of inspiration to deviate from that once in a while a little bit, but probably not enough. But that's what's right, America and probably the rest of the world as well. You hear about some places where culture is so bad that we couldn't understand it, or that people are so selfish, or so oriented towards their own families and all that progress has stopped. But we're so oriented towards materialism here that progress has stopped as well. So presumably any of those systems can be overturned. They all contain the seeds of their own destruction.
The seeds of our own destruction. That's why this new organization that's worldwide now has been going on for about a year, Extinction Rebellion. Have you heard about that?
No, they want to extinct us?
Extinction, rebelling against extinction.
Oh, rebelling against it.
We're in the middle of the sixth extinction, which will may be the final extinction. And I Googled it and got some pretty good stuff. There's a worldwide organization, and there's a European, there's an American, and then there's a Portland Extinction Rebellion. And it's pretty interesting what's going on, because I think if it has any real success, and there are identifiable leaders, then the Trump cult will find a way to take our leaders out. We're hitting the wrong track here. So we got to rebel against what's going on with this system. I'm with Bernie Sanders, and democratic socialism is the only answer.
Right. Now that's why I wouldn't raise the name of any particular political adversary in this discussion, because problems are usually systemic and not caused by individuals. You got to fine-tune the system. You got to learn the system and fix what's wrong with the system. You can't fix what's wrong. Try to fix what's wrong with the individuals. Fix the system.
And how do you do that?
How do you do that? Positive feedback. Positive feedback. Rewards for what you like.
And now and then, I mention my favorite song of all time, Alfie. Remember that?
Sure.
Song? What's it all about?
The minister at the Unitarian Church used to preach a sermon on that song every year.
What was her name?
Marilyn Sewell.
Oh yeah, she was a guest on my show years ago. Yeah. What's it all about? We met. I'm running out of steam. So, since we're running out of time, and I'm running out of things to talk about, what's on your mind now? Talk to the viewers. Look in that camera over here and tell the viewers what's going on with you right now, and what you think about our interview this evening, or anything else that comes to mind right now. And don't forget to tell your wife that you love her, because I know you do.
Oh, yes. She knows, and I do love her. And what am I going to tell? Find a way. Find a way. And what we need is more women turning out to all of the rallies, protests, demonstrations to help with the nonviolence aspect. You know, as a man, I figure I'm susceptible to making getting sucked into violence. But I think that the more women we get out there and families and all, the better we'll do at having you know, a powerful nonviolent transition of power to the back to the people.
When you get to be my age, almost everything that we talk about produces a song, and I'm always having new songs coming into my mind. As old as I am, there's so many. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. That's my final conclusion about whatever's going on or needs to be going on.
Right. I'm impressed by Vonnegut these days, and he said that you know, the reason we're here is just to love each other.
Kurt Vonnegut.
Yes.
Well, okay, looks like it's time for us to sign off. Let's see if we have time for a couple of public service announcements before we say goodnight. I want to tell you about The Nation, that oldest progressive publication in America. Is just wonderful for so long. And to learn more about the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, that's my favorite organization, go to www.aclu.org. And thanks for watching. And remember, KFC, not that KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable. You too. And you too. And you too. Thanks again for watching, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you.